big thank you and welcome to everyone who's joining us this evening. Um, we are very happy to have you here with us for our APHG exam prep webinar. I think we're going to be sharing some very helpful and useful information with you guys, and we're really excited that you've joined us. So I'm going to start off just by I'll briefly introduce myself and give a quick introduction to some of the resources for APHG teachers and all teachers that AGS has to offer you guys. And then I will hand it over graciously to our wonderful APHG professionals, including Dr. Lisa Benton-Short, the chief reader for the exam, and some very seasoned experienced APHG teachers themselves to give you guys some tips and pointers coming into the exam review week. Alrighty, that being said, hello, my name is Annika Sutton. I currently work as the coordinator of education initiatives for the American Geographical Society. I'm very happy to, be putting this together for you guys, and I'm just going to briefly share some of the other wonderful resources that we have for our educators, especially those doing advanced placement human geography. So just a brief introduction of, what our Geography Educator Initiative is. The American Geographical Society has always prioritized support for teachers, especially those in the world of APHG. And so we try to specifically design resources and programs to help teachers learn the essentials of the curriculum, connect with their colleagues, connect with professionals that are, doing exciting developments in the worlds of geography and geospatial, and enhancing the classroom experience for your students. So in addition to resources such as this one, the APHG exam prep webinar, we also have some other really useful items for you guys. And I'll just give a brief run through of some of our best ones. So we have our Daily Geo, which is a daily news blast that you will get, it'll come in through your email once you register. And it just highlights 3 top headline news stories and geography's role in each of those stories from around the world, locally and globally. We also have a monthly newsletter where we have a specific Geography Educator Initiative section, and that contains, updates on any special events, such as this one that we might be hosting for you guys, any opportunities for professional development or connection with colleagues and peers. We also run a GeoBoost grant program, and this program provides micro grants of $300 to a handful of APHG teachers just to enhance their students' learning in the classroom. So these grants can be used for things such as, buying classroom materials, books, maps, any other, hands-on things you might want to use in the classroom, supplying your students with an excursion to anything that might be geography related. We've had teachers take their students to nature centers and on brief field trips and to museums. And we typically open the applications for these up in the fall. So in the next couple of months, you'll be hearing some more about this. And if that's something that you are interested in joining, you certainly can do so. We also have plenty of webinars and videos available on our AGS YouTube channel. They're usually curriculum-based webinars and content kind of to help teachers access, the latest geographic knowledge or any interesting resources you or your students might use. And then we also have professional development opportunities, such as teacher-led webinars like this one, specifically our Teacher Fellows workshops that we host annually during our Geography 2050 Symposium, and participating in our newly founded Teen Maptivist initiative. Just a little bit more on the Teen Maptivist initiative. We have launched this a couple semesters ago. We originally did it with 4 teachers, one of whom the co-founder of Teen Maptivist, Celeste Reynolds, will be talking to you today. Teen Maptivist is a national network of high school student-led chapters, and it encourages students to use publicly available open source GIS platforms to leverage the power of geography and GIS and make a difference in their communities locally and make a difference internationally. And with the success of those piloting chapters, we've been looking to expand this program. I've linked our website right here down below. And of course, I'll share all the links and resources in this presentation with you afterwards. So we are certainly looking to expand our Teen Maptivist initiative in the fall of next semester. And if that's something that you're interested in, please reach out and we would love to have you join us. If you'll be present at the APHG reading at the beginning of June, we will also have another more in-depth presentation on this, and we'll have some resources there for any questions that you might have about this. And applications for our 2025 Teacher Fellow cohort are now open. So as I mentioned just a moment ago, each year at our annual Geography 2050 Symposium, we hold a special, 2 days of workshops specifically geared for APHG teachers, where we allow you guys to connect with each other, share resources. We bring in people from, universities, from Nat Geo, from a bunch of, separate private organizations to share resources with you guys that are useful for your personal development, also for your students in the classroom. So applications for that are now open. You're welcome to scan this QR code, which will take you directly to the application, or you can find it through the new and improved education page on the AGS website, which I will also now take you and let you glance at that so you know exactly where to find that application and where to find all of these other wonderful resources that I just described. Alrighty, so that link in the presentation will take you right here, which is under our AmericanGeo.org website. This is our new Geography Educator Initiative page that we just launched today. Here you'll see a brief description of what GEI is, and then if you go down, we have all of those wonderful resources for you. AGS Teacher Fellows, which will bring you directly. This is last year's cohort, in case you were curious, a really wonderful group of educators right there. And here you can find that application that I was discussing right here. So we have the Teacher Fellows, our GeoBoost, webinars and videos. All of these wonderful resources I've just described are available here on our new education page for you, which of course I will share with you at the conclusion of this presentation. All righty. Well, thank you guys so much for letting me share all of that information with you. The last thing I will do is kind of lay out the agenda for this evening. So first, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Lisa Benton-Short, Chief Reader, APHG Professor of the APHG exam and Professor at the Department of Geography at GW. She's going to be going through task verbs for all of us. Then we will have Mrs. Annalisa Dahlgren doing free response questions. She's also an AP Human Geography teacher. Celeste Reynolds will do our multiple choice question section. And then finally, rounding us out, saving the best for last, we'll have Jayla Vasquez doing her review week best practices to hopefully give you guys kind of a cohesive idea of how to structure your review week and bringing all three of these sections together into a comprehensive review for you guys. So with that being said, I will go ahead and pass it off to Dr. Lisa Benton-Short. I'll go ahead and go to the next slide, and you just let me know when you need me to go, and I gotcha.
Well, thank you, Annika. It's great to be here with you all. It's amazing to see 43 of you give up some of your evening time to think about helping your students be even more successful on the exam. And thanks to Annika for organizing this, this traditional I guess it's our third or fourth year that we've been doing this webinar. So you can move to the next slide. Mm-hmm. So I just a really quick refresh. I know most of you, I looked over the participant list, and I would say that half of the names I recognize as being very experienced teachers. So I hope that I can add something to your understanding of how you can help students prepare for the exam in just a couple weeks' time. Don't forget the exam has two parts to it. Most of you know that by now. 60 multiple choice questions are worth 50% of the exam score, and then 3 free response, which are worth the other 50%. The one thing that I want to highlight for you that I don't think is very well understood, because of course we haven't had any multiple choice exam released to you since the new CED or curriculum framework became operational in 2021, is the fact that there are numerous sets of 3 multiple choice questions that are usually based on a stimulus and that scaffold in difficulty. So if you have not had or incorporated multiple choice sets of 3 questions that are around the same stimulus. It's not too late. Get your students kind of practicing that. And I would also say that it's not just 1 or 2 sets that are on the exam. I would say it's more like 5 or 6 sets. So they are going to see a stimulus, and there'll probably be an entry-level task that they're asked to do for that first multiple choice response, which could be something like identify the region where HDI is higher. And then the second one could be something like describe a reason, or one of these things could describe a reason. And then likely the third of the questions within the multiple choice sets would have an explain or a compare task verb. So that's not as well understood because, of course, you haven't been able to see the multiple choice exams. But practice with multiple choice sets as well. That will help your students be pretty comfortable when they see as many as they're going to see on this upcoming exam. And just a reminder, we have 3 free response questions. Each question is worth 7 points. Generally starts with part A, moving to part G, for a total of 7 parts in each question. For each of the 3 questions, there's a total of 21 tasks. So your students are doing a lot in the time that they are allotted for the free response. And if you're not sure, one of the things that we have done is make the free response questions very transparent. So the first FRQ your students will see, no matter what form they're on, is FRQ1, which will have no stimulus. There'll be no map, no chart, no table, no photograph. FRQ2 always has 1 stimulus, a map, a chart, a satellite image. And the third FRQ is always a 2 stimulus or 2 stimuli question. It could be 2 maps showing time difference. It could be a chart and a table. It could be an image and a map. But hopefully your students have been practicing a variety of FRQs. And just keep in mind that I know that the exam is digital this year, and students do have the ability to go back and forth between FRQs. So you can also suggest that FRQ1 is not necessarily the first question that they must answer in order to progress to the other FRQs. And Elisa, the next slide, please. So I did want to talk about our task verbs. So if you've taught other AP other AP courses, I just want to make the distinction that in recent years with our refresh of our curriculum back in 2020, we reduced our task verbs to just these 5 task verbs that you're looking at. And these are the only task verbs that your students will see on both the multiple choice and the FRQs. And this is really important because if you've been using other task verbs over the next few weeks, I would just limit all of the kind of prep work you're doing, any kind of in-class work or mock exams, to these 5 task verbs, because then you can really help students see what they're actually going to see on the exam. So our 5 task verbs are identify and define. Those are pretty straightforward tasks. They're also what we call entry level. That is, we expect any student of APHG to actually earn their points with entry level. Describe is the 3rd task verb that your students will come across. Now, sometimes describe can be kind of entry level, and sometimes it's a little bit more challenging and it could be a proficient point. And then compare is considered an advanced task verb, as is explain. Explain has some of the highest level thinking, and sometimes it's a proficient explain. Most of the time it's going to be advanced. Keep in mind that each exam has a mix that the statisticians put together of entry-level questions, proficient questions, and advanced questions. And this is true for both the FRQs. So of those 7 tasks in a single FRQ, you're going to have maybe 2 entry-level task verbs, maybe 2 to 3 proficient task verbs, and then at least 2 advanced task verbs. So as you're putting together some of your own mock exams to get students used to that, realize how much the proficient and advanced task verbs play in the exam. And this is also true for the multiple choice questions. So I'll just leave you with the idea that our explain task verb appears a lot. I mean, like 3 to 4 times in every FRQ. Next slide, Annika. So I want to highlight the 2 most advanced task verbs. And I want to do that because for your students to score a 3, 4, or 5, they are going to have to successfully respond to the advanced task verbs like compare and explain. Again, when you think about where the points can be earned for identify and define, there's not going to be that many in an FRQ. So your students who are, looking to do well on the exam and earn that 3, 4, or 5 for college credit really do need to have comfortability and understanding what they are expected to do when they see these advanced task verbs. So compare, sometimes you'll see it as outright compare 2 things, or you might see it as explain one similarity or explain one difference. We would never ask for both in the same. We would never ask for explain one similarity and one difference, because that's actually 2 tasks. The most important thing to understand about the compare task verb is that the written response, especially on the FRQs, it has to say something meaningful about both X and Y in the comparison, right? So if you haven't been working on this, it's not too late. Get your students to understand that they have to really close the loop by saying one sentence about X and then the next sentence about Y. So let me give you an example. Annika, the next one. So here's one from 2 years ago. It was a compare task verb that was a straightforward compare. So it says compare one difference in territorial organization between the governments of unitary states and the governments of federal states. So some of you might have already come across this. It's out of our political unit. Answer A, unitary states tend to have a more top-down form of governance. This is correct. It is not, however, a threshold response to earn a point for the comparison task verb. And the reason why, they said nothing about federal states. Okay, so they had a good sentence, a good response towards telling me a characteristic about a unitary state, but they did not actually compare because they didn't close that loop and give me something about federal states that would essentially provide a difference between these 2 forms of governance. If we look at answer B, unitary states have a single government that expresses power over the entire territory, whereas federal states divide power among regional governments that control a limited portion of territory. This was a student that really knew and articulated quite well on the exam, and they did earn a point for this response. You can see that they had a whole sentence on unitary states, a characteristic of a unitary state. Then they had that wonderful bridging, word whereas that sets up that notion of difference. And then they go on to provide some characteristics of federal states to complete that comparison. So again, this is a really important, how often does compare show up? Maybe once or twice within the 3 FRQs. But remember, they are also going to see it on MCQs. And so you want to get them thinking that there's going to be something said about part A or X and something about part B or Y. Okay, next. The explain task verb is one of our task verbs that is really full of all sorts of phrases. So you can see it in explain why, explain how, explain one way in which, explain the strengths of a theory or a process, explain the limitation or weakness of a theory or process, explain a limitation of a stimulus like a map, a chart, a photograph, explain the degree to which. Now you can see that some of these explains could be proficient depending on what skill they are actually testing in that big matrix of skills, 2D, 3E. And then the explains in bold are all going to be advanced points. And these are much higher level thinking points. Being able to explain the strength or weakness in a theory That really shows us some level of rigor. So these are the 7 ways or phrases that your students will see explain. And next one, Annika. Generally, this is a really important task verb. So here, for example, is one of our FRQs from previous year. And you can see we start with part A with a define task verb. That's pretty entry level. A B part says describe. And then you see C, explain how. D, explain A. E, explain one weakness. F, explain how surplus food. And G, explain the degree to which. So of the 7 points, 5 come from explain task verbs. That's why I wanted to talk to you tonight, because I hope that you're giving your students lots of explain tasks to do. The more they see that, the more comfortable they get with writing a response that will earn them a point in the explain task. Annika, next one. So what are some of the challenges around the explain task verb? Well, most of your students who don't earn a point are because they don't write sufficiently to achieve an explanation. They often start short. They give us a good description of something, but they're lacking the depth to get to an explanation, right? One of the ways that you can help your students prepare for those explain task verbs is to really encourage them, hey, if you see an explain task verb, I expect you to write a because somewhere in your response, right? Or a whereas, or as a consequence, or as a result. One of those bridging terms that means that they've said something at the beginning, and now once they start writing something after the word because, that becomes the explanation. So I would say that I would generally encourage your students to write a minimum of 2 sentences. We find that students oftentimes write 1 sentence, and that is just not enough to get at that level of explanation that earns them a point. I mean, yes, I have seen beautiful 1-sentence explanations, but a lot of times your students are just stopping short of providing an explanation. Annika, next. So thinking about the exam, really emphasize that the task verb explain requires those terms why, because, and how it differs from identify and describe, right? Describe is just to give a characteristic. Identify is just to be able to point something out. Explain is a higher level task, and we want to see students writing a minimum of 2 sentences for them to be successful. I know we have a digital exam this year. Please, I'm begging you to encourage your students to label the section of their questions. Part A, and then their response. Part B, then their response. They do not have to answer these in order. If they open up the exam and they can see right away, they can do A and C and D, and then kind of give some thought about how they want to answer the other parts. As long as they label it, it makes it so much easier for our readers to see where your students have earned their points. And my last suggestion is, I haven't talked about this very much, but on the FRQ section, your FRQs have 7 parts to them. Generally, 2 of those parts will cross into another unit. So there's a primary unit, say agriculture. So 4 out of the 7 tasks or 5 out of the 7 tasks will be associated with agriculture, but there could cross over into an economic unit or an urban unit. And so there's always a secondary unit that every FRQ will touch upon. And so if you haven't started doing those kind of integrative questions where you're crossing units, I really encourage you to do that as you come into the practice sessions for the exam. And Annika, next. And finally, students do not have to be perfect to earn that 5. You know, every year, the percentage that they need to correctly respond to an MCQs changes, but it's somewhere around 70% or so to be in the 4s or 5s. In terms of FRQs, I would say, 4 to 5 correct responses in each FRQ is going to put them in that 4 to 5 range for a final score. So, we're not looking for perfection, and just kind of maybe help your students understand that if there's a part of the FRQ they don't know, it's okay. They can still do really well, even if they don't answer all 21 parts of their FRQs or all the MCQs correctly. So we really look forward to having and helping your students succeed at the reading by scoring those FRQs. So I think I'll turn it back to Annika and she can introduce our next speaker.